Do you feel like you're stuck even at the top of your game? The old ways of leading might be holding you back without even realizing it. This conversation is for leaders ready to rediscover their edge, not through more hustle, but through deeper understanding. Welcome back to the Champion Mindset Collective. I'm your host, Anthony Dahya. I'm really looking forward to this conversation that brings together so many different threads of psychology, neuroscience, and what our guest calls energy medicine. It's about how we can truly perform at our best, not just as leaders, but as whole people. Helen Argyrou is an award-winning clinical psychologist, leadership coach, and an agent of change. Born and bred in South Africa, her innovative drum therapy practices have traveled across 13 countries. This has led her to become a neuroscience researcher, and she has since published a bestseller, co-authoring 3 more. Beyond her work as an author, Helen has founded the Women of Truth platform, which has staged 170 speakers and awarded 60 health thought leaders from 25 countries. Now her energy medicine forums are uniting leaders across 5 continents to pioneer more integrated and inclusive approaches to healthcare. She is also an ambassador of several global movements focused on female leadership and social impact. Helen, it's great to have you on the Champion Mindset Collective.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It's lovely to be here and lovely title for this podcast.
Yeah, it is. It's great to have you here. So, Helen, you and I met on the Global Speakers Talk, I think it was last month, where we spoke, and I thought what you shared was really great, so I wanted to invite you to share your journey. Before we go into a whole lot of questions, Helen, share with us your journey in life from childhood to now.
Thank you. Yes, I was also really happy to hear what you had to say on that Global Speakers Talk. And for me, I started my journey as the child of an immigrant family in South Africa. I ended up, but I really was born in Zimbabwe. And my parents left this little island of Cyprus many years ago when there weren't many jobs here. My dad left at 14, uneducated. My mom left younger at 3 years old. And both ended up in Africa due to the fact that the British had colonized some countries there, and Zimbabwe, old form Rhodesia, was one of them. So Cyprus was under British rule, a little island on top of Africa. Those who don't know it, come and visit. We need as many cool people as we can get. And from that time, there was a linkage between these colonies. And of course, my grandfather then found work over there as a builder. And I grew up in South Africa in and amongst a very diverse, interesting, provocative, confrontational political environment, but was also very much trained into a strong cultural, respecting your elders, ancestors kind of tradition, which is Greek Cypriot, a little bit of a dialect to the real formal Greek. And later decided I wanted to study away from home to really find myself. I felt very much that I needed to know who I was away from all the attachments and connections that normally keep us safe and in harmony. And that very much, as challenging as it was, took me very much deeper into discovering more of who I am and spending 10 years in psychoanalysis so that I could become a clinical psychologist, which was a personal choice to really deepen my own self-inquiry. Very tough at times to really be on your own in the world and discover yourself and the world away from what you've been taught sometimes. But I think it's imperative to begin to really give yourself opportunity to know who you really are, which means at times we have to do challenging things and break some kind of attachments we might have. In that time, I was very fortunate, I find now, to have studied at a very progressive university called University of Cape Town, great city. If anyone wants to visit, I suggest you do. And it was very interesting political time because it was really where they were beginning to explain the theory behind racial prejudice, what happens in the brain when we have certain kind of confirmation bias. And I was very invigorated at the time to be learning about some very contentious and tough topics from the psychological point of view. And we also had a very interesting mix between the indigenous knowledge systems of the time, how they looked at mental illness, and then how this Western model of medicine was looking at performance, potential, human personality, neurosis, and obviously also mental illness, which set up a very strong, I would say, baseline for me about being a very critical thinker and to be able to compare narratives, to be able to be responsible about how we practice whatever it is we end up practicing. If we are in the health sciences, to have a point of view about things, but to also, have to negotiate your point of view is very important, to not just take what you think is fundamental, but to test it out. So that led me a bit more into scientific type of research and really trying to look deeper into subcultures. So I studied a lot of minority and vulnerable groups, and I tend to be drawn a lot to doing work in that sector, even though I do a lot of work on the other end of the spectrum with leaders and conferencing. I ended up coming to Cyprus 20 years ago, back to initially the idea of a homeland, but it's really turned into a very diverse and interesting place. We've had 500,000 people immigrate to this island in the last 5 years post-COVID, which is also speaking a lot to the new political climate in the world at large, of how, we are now a nation that's trying to figure out how to stay in balance on the planet, and migration is again happening in a totally different wave across the planet. So I feel quite intrigued by the fact that we are again seeing what I started off with from immigrant parents happen again in the world now. And it's become a very interesting location for me because it's quite central. It's geopolitically complex. And so I decided to put a lot more invested energy into bringing people here to begin to work more with the energy and deeper meaning of this place, because it's ancient, 10,000 BC, has held a lot of complexity in the Trojan War. So there was rumors that actually did happen, and it happened around these waters. And that also we are now seeing diversity in a whole new way play out in the world, especially in Europe and even here. And this forum, or let's say where I've ended up in my career, has become a really symbolic way of also marrying or combining, let's say, the very scientific medicine, medical protocol, and way of looking at human behavior more on an evidence-based type way of thinking, together with a very artistic, creative, therapeutic side of the work that I do, which is in short energy, but actually has a very strong science behind it too. So it's become a new pathway to really make the point that I think it's time for us to begin to marry and merge things and think more integratively as people, to not be separating things out as much as we have. And there's a lot more to say about that, but I think for now that's the basic premise of how do we become one and really come together in things. It's a very important time for that to be happening.
I agree with you with everything you've shared, and such an amazing journey you've had. Lots to unpack, and agree with what you're saying about uniting, and it's about the collective consciousness. And this is why this podcast is called The Collective, because together we can actually make a change in the world.
Yeah, that
collective
collective
a better place.
is important. Yeah, absolutely.
100%. You've had such a diverse, interesting journey, moving from clinical psychology to leadership, coaching, drum therapy, and neuroscience research. Can you take us back to an early point, turning point, a moment where things really shifted for your perspective on human potential and led you down the path of exploring the energy medicine?
Sure. There's quite a few, but I think I always talk about one that I'm going to avoid talking about today, so I can talk about another one, which wasn't exactly on the energy medicine point, but it does make a deeper entry point for us to understand the relevance of what energy medicine can do. So I remember before leaving for Cyprus, when I was back in 2005, around there, I was asked by a few NGOs to organize these group team buildings, and I was doing drum therapy type orchestra, facilitated drum circles back in the day when they had just begun. So I set up a company called Drumaware. And it was all about this idea of using the drum as a connecting tool, really getting the group invigorated, creating this nice bond. Because remember, in that country, we had 11 official languages and many different cultural groups, a lot of racial tension. So working in corporates was quite tough. You had to really understand each other, and there was a lot of dynamics around race, ethnicity. And so once I was in that flow, I got booked by a company. They gave me a deposit and somehow convinced me to take my instruments into this warehouse. And I stored them over for the night, because the idea was the next day we were going to have a drum circle in the forest. of Claremont on Table Mountain. Anyone knows where that is, you'll know it's beautiful there. And when I arrived in the morning with my colleague who was going to help me, an African drummer, I came out of the car and I heard him say, "It smells like a dead rat here." And immediately I had this sunken feeling that something terribly wrong has happened. And I didn't know what, but as I walked to the storeroom, I saw it empty and there were no drums in sight. And I had already packed 50 instruments into that room the night before. 30 of them were mine and another 20 I had rented from many different drummers around the cityscape. And at the time, I was working a little bit more as a trainer. So a lot of these people were quite not that well-known friends of mine, but they had helped me out because we all were drummers in some sense. And I was really, really concerned. I had a very serious tone in my voice with the man trying to figure out what had happened, only to discover these guys cleaned out the storeroom and pretty much stole the drums. In that moment, I had to make decisions, and I took the next step to go and report it to the police. They were not interested. Since the man had given me money, I had agreed to transact with him, and there was no way to trace it because once I called the numbers and checked the bank accounts, the money had been withdrawn. The telephone number no longer worked. So obviously I was a subject of fraud, which happens so regularly in Africa. But in this moment at the police station, I thought, this is a very, very deep answer to a question I had in my mind for 2 weeks. I, prior to this day, had been, I don't even know what you would call it, meditating or praying together that I would find my next destination because I started to feel very restless in Cape Town. And as I was doing this daily practice in the morning of meditation and prayer, I was very struck by the fact that I remembered in that moment that I had been asking for guidance. I had been wanting to be inspired into a new plan. And I was there in the police station thinking, I have no drums left. So I am free to go and do whatever I want in the world. I can go and buy new drums somewhere else and start this in Egypt or Greece or Spain or whatever I want. But the most important moment, Anthony, was when I sat back down after knowing they were not going to pursue the case. I had no more instruments left. I had to pay the people back that had given me theirs to use for the day and make sense of why somebody would want a white South African woman to not have her drums to go and do her drum therapy facilitation team building and what was behind that act of vengeance or crime or sabotage. What was it? And in that moment, it went very, very deep for me because I went very deep into my spirituality, to my belief system, my values, and I had to work through all that frustration, all the blame, my own guilt, my racial guilt, my white guilt, which is a very big theme. Once you kind of explore more of those dynamics living in a country like South Africa. And where I ended up was fascinating because it was really what prompted me to get to Cyprus and to start an entire new drum process here. And I actually brought the African drum to Cyprus, and now people play this drum here all over the island. And it was also the start of me taking much more seriously my intention to investigate rhythm and how it really affects consciousness and take it much more seriously and do all the study of the ancient world and how they would use rhythm in ancient times to pass knowledge and to entrain the brain. So it's really one of the most ancient forms of brain alchemy there is. And in the moment, I thought of all those drums, and I had played those drums with hundreds of children at hundreds of gatherings. Hundreds is a bit much, but hundreds of children at many, many gatherings over about 3 years when I had run this Drum Aware movement. And I immediately realized that I could not hold any negativity or any anguish or anger towards these people, because ultimately that would go onto these drums. And all the years I had been thinking that every child that played that drum put a little bit of good vibes into it. So when I would take it to another child that was a bit scared to play or was a bit shy or was, struggling, I would remind that child, there's so many little children that have played that drum, and the drum's just waiting for you to get a sound out of it. The drum just wants you to play it when you're ready, and I'd work therapeutically like that. I thought all those years and all that invested energy is not mine and I'm not responsible for it. There's all these hands and all these people that have had use out of these instruments. So the instruments should go wherever they need to go, in whatever way they need to go, with the best blessed positive energy I can manage. And I really was struck by myself in that moment because I'd never felt a feeling like that. It was like forgiveness and deep understanding that somewhere I needed to facilitate these instruments to go somewhere else in this really crazy, weird way. And I could either hold my blame and anger onto it or not. In that moment, I realized we are all connected, and whatever we wish upon others and whatever has been done to us that we think is good reason to be the way we are or treat people the way we think they deserve is our choice. And I could not make another choice because in some way my world was opening up. So something positive came out of this right there in the moment. I could not pursue any more case around this topic. So I would not be holding it as a big gripe. And those instruments and the life thereon, the future thereon of that whole transmission of, let's say, that energy was to carry forward. If I was going to hold it back with my own anger, I had the choice to do that, and I could just forgive and move on with it. And from that moment, I'll just say, all those people that I rented instruments from showed me the same kind of kindness and forgiveness that I found in that moment. And they all started suggesting that I go and find these guys that were going to sell me back drums at half the price because they were all trying to support me and thought it was terrible what happened. And this whole community came together around this issue. And I thought, wow, as I'm leaving South Africa, I never knew that all these people loved and cherished me and what I'm doing and themselves and this whole community in the way that they do to actually rise to the challenge and really support each other. So it was a direct example of how down becomes something up and how sometimes the bad stuff is there to give us an opportunity to really rise and figure out who we want to be.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always thought good and bad was like good was good and bad was bad, but they're just opposites of each other.
Exactly.
And every experience that you go through, every adversity that you go through is there to shape you into the version of you that you're meant to be.
Yeah.
And the
Absolutely.
more we lean into it, like you said, the more we start to observe and come to the awareness of what's happening for us or what's happening around us. And that, like you said before, we are connected. Whatever we do is going to have a direct impact on other people as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There was a lot going on for you in that moment, wasn't there? Like when you, yeah. And so how did that experience challenge your earlier thinking and clinical understanding?
I think even, as I said, another story that I often share is how I really discovered drumming. And what I was always struck by in these moments where I had these ecstatic experiences of drumming and the real invention of new rhythm as you're freestyling or playing a musical instrument and you begin to create from that space. And this moment of, let's say a moment where you don't recognize yourself, but you feel something much deeper than you might have another time. I think all of these moments for me are examples of a type of transcendence and really understanding that the brain is capable of going beyond what it actually knows to go into states of much higher contemplation. And by higher, I mean the frequency of brainwave activity is actually higher. And the awareness is much stronger of how things come together. And the more of that we can do, the more we begin to see ourselves away from our own little private ego and interconnected into the web of life and the orchestra of life. And so I think that was not only a challenge, but an expansion of my clinical understanding, because it's when I began to really experience and embody this idea of interconnectivity, that we are actually always in a synergy with things. We just don't know how to work with it because it's so overwhelming and our brains can't compute it. So that's what I would say, this moment of synergy and interconnectedness.
Yeah. And what you shared earlier about the kids that, hundreds of kids that played many moments of the drum, all that energy was transferred through, right? And every time someone played it, it then transferred their energy and then went on to other people. So it's an amazing thing how, interesting thing is I was listening to a podcast today with a lady called Katie Clark on Lewis House's podcast called The Greatness Mindset. and she was talking about a lot about energy and frequency and vibration. And so what you're talking about is actually resonating quite well.
Brilliant.
Now, you talk about neuroscience and energy medicine. For a leader listening who might be operating at a high level but feeling depleted, how do you see these two areas connecting to help them move from just managing or to truly thriving and achieving those peak states?
Great question. And it's twofold. I think a lot of what we wish and hope to do in the moment when we're struggling needs to actually be laid down in a lifestyle habit that we build over time. So there's few things that help us right there and then when we're struggling. But the real gold, I think, in life is to be able to build the plan. So one way to do that is to obviously begin to realize that we have to spend our energy in different ways through our work, through our lifestyle, through the things that we're obliged to do and that we feel responsible for. So it's not just automatically available. And we can't just expect to regenerate it by being hyperactive or active in even just in being active. You can generate energy, but the secret lies in being able to slow down and to go in the reverse speed to actually generate even more energy. And there's a whole little book template I'm writing on this topic. Like, in actually to go forward, you need to pull the arrow back, right? And a root of a tree goes deep into the ground in order for the tree to rise up tall. And it's quite the same in, let's say, an African tradition, which happens to play out in many cultures too, where you have to honor the ancestors in order to have your life flourish. It's the same concept metaphysically and bioenergetically, let's say, is you need to be able to pull yourself back in order to shoot further forward. So what does that actually mean? It means being able to go very deep into a practice that actually takes you into your parasympathetic nervous system, hopefully, slows down the heartbeat. If you can find one that does, that's what drumming is so amazing, because we can do that with drumming. And it's a very, very specific kind of genius that's been discovered in order to be able to do that, to entrain at that level is not a very common thing. It's a very interesting skill that we can build. But at the simplest level is to actually really just have good rest time. But when you're resting, to be very consciously aware of the fact that you're generating energy. And one way is just to lie down on the floor and as close to the earth as you can, and really just concentrate on the magnetic gravity underneath you and use it as an activating principle to actually re-energize the body. But as you can see, that's the slowing down principle. So that's one quick tip, but there are many more. There are also ways where we can practice new peak states and learn to get better at them through time. And I can tell you a little bit more about them if we have time later, but I think, it's very good to study a little bit about what we call coherence, which is where the brain and the body are in sync. And there's real science on how to activate, prolong, and intensify coherence. And it's something that we talk a lot about. And having practiced it for many years, I also think it's very, very profound when it comes to rejuvenation, recovery, really being able to practice coherence in different ways over different times in one's life is also something that deepens and becomes richer in teaching you more and more ways that you can get back in sync with your own body and brain over time.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's so important to slow down and pause. And I was reading something or watching something where it says the universe speeds up, whereas we should be slowing down. And when you slow down, you have more awareness of what's happening, and then you're able to observe. But, we've been taught to just go hustle, 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 grind, grind, grind. And it's when you slow down is when you pause, you can go faster because you're actually taking time to reflect
Yes.
on what's happening, right?
Right.
So many amazing gems there that you've shared. Could you give us an example of how you apply this with a leader?
Sure. There are many ways, and it really depends on how receptive someone is and what their time habits lifestyle looks like exactly. But one thing that you can do very easily is to actually make a commitment to yourself that every day you will take at least 5 minutes to go into some kind of reverse or break of the pattern. And that can be very simple, just like actually spending 5 very present minutes in nature. Around the flow of nature, we have actually a different electrical current. So you need to become more conscious of that. So it's not just enough to just go and stand near a rock and just spend your 5 minutes there, but sometimes it can be. If you're conscious of the fact that you're doing that and you're very present in your mind that you're doing that, there's been some really interesting neuroscience around the actual power of short breaks in high productivity cycles. And the break has to be as contrasted to the performance cycle as possible. So even just 5 minutes of going into a place near the beach, let's say near your office, or just staring out the window for 5 minutes, really tuning into the waves, can make a huge difference to your productivity. So I like to suggest various peak state trainings with people. So I like to work with 5 types of breathing. I do that a lot with people that have anxiety, and I take them progressively into deeper and deeper concentrated breathing practices, because if you don't know by now, it's everybody listening, it's time to catch it. It's that breath changes the mitochondria, breath retention, really. And retention on inhalation, retention on exhalation have huge effects on the way the body recovers and restores. And when you use it in very concentrated, progressive ways, it becomes a very, very powerful way to train the body into peak states.
Very, very good. Love it. And there's what you talked about, the 5-minute break. That what brings to mind is the Pomodoro technique, which is working for 25 minutes, focused and in flow, and then taking 5 minutes out, not going on your phone or any of that, but actually just spending time, like you said, just going in, spending time with nature. It could be 5 minutes in the back garden or in front of in the sun, and just reflecting and being aware and conscious of it.
Yeah.
What does a peak state feel like to someone who hasn't ever experienced it before?
Another great question. There are many different types. I would say at the baseline, we all have a type of peak state that maybe we feel when we just wake up from a really good sleep. It's kind of what it feels like, a little bit hazy, but in a really stretched, expanded, and kind of dreamy way. And there are also peak states that make you feel hyper alert, like if you've ever done lots of meditation or lots and lots of holidaying. You might find yourself stumbling along a road, coming back to the house after the beach all day, let's say, and then you look at some flowers and they just look a little bit more bright than they normally did, or the leaves start shining in the tree with the sun coming through, and you notice this fluorescent green in the leaves, and then you pick up different types of green color as you look through the foliage. So there's ways where we can perceive and experience the elements in a much more profound way in peak states too. And that's a type of more alert peak state. And the ones I like to talk a lot about, that I've experienced a lot through music and drumming, which is why I do what I do, is these kind of ecstatic, dynamic, meditative states, which are really what you feel when you are in the throe of a abstract painting, like those ancient type murals sometimes, or these new modern artists who might splash paint. There's that kind of fervor, that kind of expanding your energy, or expressing your energy rather. And you can actually hone that skill and reach a type of peak state that you see a musician in when he starts to improvise. And again, there's real neuroscience on jazz musicians who were put in an MRI and were tested again. Brain activity is the highest when you are musically improvising. Nothing else in the world is as complex, invigorating, and stimulating for the brain than this particular skill of musical improvisation. Artistic expression gets a little bit closer, dynamic movement gets a little bit closer, but nothing as much, because the brain is able to invent and be in the state of flow at the same time. So even flow itself is a little bit lower than what I'm talking about. So that musical expression, it's like a type of ecstasy biochemically, and it's also so concentrated mind space that you begin to open out these new and interesting possibilities that your brain and coherence is actually expanding you into. So it comes back to that collective genius that we can tap into, superconsciousness, we call it sometimes, where you are communing with the universal energy. And there's really interesting ways of understanding that scientifically now too.
What's the simplest way to start learning to get that coherence between your brain and your body?
There's specific exercises for it, but one way is to take the body into deep relaxation and then to get into breathing. And once in the breathing state, you actually bring a state of gratitude back into the body through thought and through this now calibrating back to the breath and the heart space. But the way you tap into the gratefulness needs to be very uncontaminated. And why it's so healing and it's actual medicine for people that have had traumatic experiences after the healing process to go into coherence helps them to clear out all the residue. And that's also why it's so hard sometimes for us to do, because we might be attaching to things that actually cause us some kind of pain. So we don't really hit that sweet spot of clear, pure joy where the body-mind system is in good sync. So you need to make sure you're choosing free from contamination type memories and hold them for at least a minute or two and then see if you can expand that state. And, a lot of new interesting tricks around how to do that where you've got to do it for 17 seconds before the next thought comes. So then you need to keep cycling certain thoughts to keep the state expanding.
Yeah. Also about learning to let it go and heal from the trauma with experiences that we've been through.
Exactly.
So that when we're relaxing and in that deep state, that the thoughts that we are constantly thinking are the ones that, like you said, are uncontaminated. So yeah, absolutely. Now, we often hear about managing stress, but
yes,
you go deeper into understanding brainwaves of performance. For performance, how can a busy leader practically start to understand and even influence their own brainwave states to improve their decision-making, creativity, and overall presence, especially when they're feeling under pressure?
I go back to what was said before about to intervene in any moment of difficulty, we have to respect that the body-mind system actually needs a preparation daily through a lifestyle habit that's actually giving us more and more opportunity to develop the skill of ability to relax, decompress, reorganize, decide correctly over time. So in the moment, there are certain things that you can do. And then if you're building in that kind of lifestyle habit, there's even more that you can do. So one quick thing that I want to mention is the waves of the ocean again. They actually change in terms of the frequency, the repetition and cycles of water movement is actually very synced up to brain harmony. So even just playing 2 or 3 minutes of the ocean on a YouTube track, or even going down to the sea for a little while when you are feeling like that and just really tuning out is very, very helpful. And there's also a lot of new science on the frequency of beehives by a great man called Dr. Zach Bush. He's been talking a lot about PTSD, high anxiety states, don't need meds, they need breathing, and if possible, take yourself into a beehive, be near a beehive. And that frequency for a period of time is actually helping to decompress all that adrenaline. And that's because it's frequency medicine, which is why we're talking energy medicine today. I mentioned before also this very important power of slowing down the heart rate. And it really, really gets us into the parasympathetic nervous system. I have tracks for that where I've actually recorded and will be recording much more frequency-based quick tip methods. And the slowing down of heart rate is really even something you can do yourself. You can actually just sit down and hold the 2 fingers on the wrist over here and just start breathing very, very consciously for 26 times through a straw. And as you're breathing in, you exhale through the mouth, breathe in through the mouth, and you listen to that sound. And even for 26 repetitions, it's about 4 to 5 minutes or 4 minutes, your heart rate drops tremendously. Your whole brain system has to kick into listening and focusing on the pursing of the lips. So you start to stimulate meridians in the mouth that actually activate higher concentration states. you bypass the frustration and annoyance of having to slow down, because you will need to keep going, because something puts you a little bit in this kind of hypnotic, meditative state in order to get to 26. And I suggest it very much for all kinds of situations as a starting point for people to begin to just get present into their body. Just breathing isn't enough, because your brain might still go back to your thoughts, which is part of why you're stressed, because the thoughts are creating beta brainwave, which is fast, rapid thinking. Everything I've just mentioned takes you back into alpha and deep alpha. But there's that switch that has to happen back into parasympathetic. So you need a duration of time and a strong enough push to make sure that you don't just keep going back into your thinking.
Yeah, and we need to have that deeper breath rather than the shallow, because the shallow is keeping you in that anxiety,
Exactly.
anxious mode, right? So the more deeper breaths that you can take, and I do this quite often. Sometimes, like when I wake up in the morning, I'm breathing deeply and doing my gratefulness, and then at night I do the same thing before I sleep.
It's a good practice, and you'll find that you have more and more control over it the more you do it. But also, pursing the lips as a beginning point is actually forcing you to take in less oxygen. And so it also can help the breath trigger slower heart rate quicker. So you can also try that, add it to it, and see if it actually even helps you go down a bit more.
Yeah. I remember going back about six years ago. I used to be very anxious, chronic anxious, overthinking, all that sort of stuff. But then I learned to regulate myself, started doing reprogramming at night as I slept, and then just going for, like I said, going for walks on the beach. After I read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle and staying in the present moment, that also helped a lot as well. Now, what is one of the common mistakes that leaders make trying to manage their energy?
I can say many things. I think we all are learning so many things as we reach more and more higher states of productivity, and we realize we have more and more that we can do. Then we try and take on more. And we tend to live, however, with a very kind of sticky thinking. I want to talk about that maybe, to say that there are ways where we need to realize certain things need us to connect what we think, and certain things need us to disconnect what we think. So let me explain what I mean. There's a lot of education in the world around how things are very separate, and how you need to be either a mathematician or you become an artist. Or at work, you might be finding, certain ways people function, and their productivity level is, also bothering for you. It's bothering you, but you also have in your own mind these relationships with these people and how you feel about them. So I think there's certain times in life where we need to be looking at, how am I thinking about a certain situation? And does it serve me to be connecting these things? Or would it be better if I had them in separate categories? There's other times in life, paradoxically, where it's much more helpful for us to be connecting things. And actually, one of the problems that we're facing and struck with is that we've separated things far too much. So I think as leaders, this becomes a very powerful skill of discernment. And metacognition, as we know, is one of the most profound and developed skills we have. So we need to develop this skill of reflecting on how we think, metacognition, understand the thinking system that we hold as leaders, because we can do a lot of damage if we don't. And as I mentioned, one specific aspect is to know discerningly whether it serves me to be really integrated in the way I'm going to work here with this person. Like, I really respect that they have a personal life right now, single mom, and can't get to work on time. And I'm going to go with that as part of the premise of me improving her productivity. Is I need to align with that reality, and I need to include it in how I lead her. Or I decide, no, I'm going to take this very discerned approach that these two things have to be separated. And, she needs to manage that one at home, and we're going to manage this aspect at work. But you can see the point is that you spend the time to actually make a discerned decision. You don't just automatically, running from some belief that you have or some kind of assumption or even just some ego trip, make these decisions ad hoc or even automatically or even as you always have. I think it takes very considered discernment for a leader to be truly a leader and to be able to be that flexible is a great way to improve that ability to be and to be reflective and to be really serious about concerning yourself with what's the most appropriate approach, not just what makes me feel good or what's easiest. It really takes this kind of considered attention to be a good leader.
Yeah. What's a simple practice that they could do every day to help them, could start to make a difference for them?
Meditation, I always come back to this, is by far of all the techniques and all the exercises and all the treatments that are out there is by far one of the most profound. But it needs to get to the point where it's no longer relying on a crutch. In other words, meditation that does not rely on sound, guidance, or even the breath at some point is a very, very deep practice that by far will get you further than anything else. Before you get there, it's great to just start with breathing, as we said. I remember hearing Dr. DeMartini say something fabulous, which I like to say too. In every morning, if you just look into the mirror and say, I am a genius, everything I wish or is possible. And you say it again, I am a genius, everything I wish or want is possible. And you say it a third time, I am a genius, everything I wish or want is possible. You begin to program your perception to actually think about, yes, I can, as opposed to, but what about this? Or no, I can't, or it's never going to work, because we do atrophy with more and more negative thinking. So you need to bypass that early in the morning. Start your day with either meditation or with a practice like that in the mirror or with some breathing.
Yeah. Love Dr. DeMartini. I've listened to many of his videos and love his. I actually went on one of his live webinars or something, I think, once. It was great. Yeah. And I totally agree with you and that's meditation is the best way to do that. And I guess you want to, with the breath, if you learn to make that breath natural, then you're not even thinking about it and it's just happening naturally. Now, looking ahead, you're pioneering a vision for integrative healthcare and leadership. What does that future look like to you?
I am avidly presenting the energy medicine concept in speeches, keynotes, conferences, forums, podcasts, really spreading this message because I truly believe it. And my life is a living testimony for it, that actually we have a very unique position coming into the world as individuals. We have unique blueprints and we are here as a miracle frequency, some call that. But also a very unique disposition and a perception happens through our lives. And in some way, the way that we develop that and the way we express that and the way we design, align, and refine our energy, which are very specific practices, take us into a deeper and deeper, unique expression of who we specifically are in the whole cosmos. And once we take full responsibility for that and we design our energy to give us the optimal performance ability and for us to reach our potential, we align with the universe, we align with what's good in the world, we understand how to also position things that we don't prefer or that have made us struggle or hurt us, and then refine our energy again into becoming even more astute and aware and focused and really intentional, and we develop a strong purpose. Once we get that in sync and we feel solid with it, we actually become energy medicine for the world. And I think there are a lot of people that are the embodiment of that, and we call them teachers, gurus, leaders. They're people that inspire us and people that we stand on their shoulders in the way that we evolve and develop from their wisdom and their teachings. And each one of us can become that. Aristotle said that, that the acorn of the palm tree is in you already. Now, what you do to water it and how will you become it is, your ultimate choice in life. But the magic of that is that there's no other palm tree like you. And, you have an amazing impact onto the world when you honestly and cherishingly own that. So the future for me is very clear in a choice. Either we are going to take that up and follow that as individuals, or we keep preferring or keep making reason-based pathways for things to not work out, or to feed the negativity, or to defend the problem, and to keep that old state of error, mistake, tragedy, drama alive. And it's true that there will be enough people that do feed that frequency, and we will continue maybe to have a lot of that on the planet, and or also be a pathway and a choice for those when they're ready. So give that up, complete with that mission, see how it all works together, and begin to put their energy and focus their energy into how to be the potent medicine for it.
Yeah, I love it. I love what you shared there. What role do you see leaders playing in bringing about a more holistic approach to well-being and performance?
Anthony, post-COVID, it was very clear for me that there are really going to be new conversations we have to have. There's new archetypes we have to develop. It's one of the research studies I'm doing for my second book for women, is that these images, ideas, even the education, even the way we've practiced medicine, the medical model, many things are just not fitting anymore for us. And when we look deeper, we can see that there was always a much more integrated way for things to work, but somehow we haven't designed it well enough in the world. And I think leaders for the future that have a more integrated approach, more holistic view of things, are going to be very, very important, because we are in a world right now that's out of sync and out of harmony. Our temperatures are reflecting that. Our planetary frustration and discord and chaos and conflict and war and eruption all over political landscapes is showing that. And we've also got an economy that's ready to change into digital currencies, and many different kinds of transactions need to be developed so that we can move away from a capitalistic consumerist type mindset to get better in balance with the world. So I think leaders who speak to that, who really feel that, and want to be in greater integrity with ethical healthcare and in the way things fit together, and really can see how the environment ends up affecting personal well-being, health, and mental health, are very important. And not just because they can see things integratedly, but because it's obvious, right? I mean, we are all sharing this same planet, and we might be many things, but we all are also our bodies and our minds. And so we can't separate these things and just pretend that, we work in a little vacuum, and if somebody just dumps their stuff in the sea over here, it doesn't matter. Eventually, it will affect all of us. So I think real leadership is about being able to hold that integrated perspective, to be responsible, to be very ethical, and to really begin to work together, to be more interconnected than we can be before, bearing in mind that there are going to be that split in our planet, maybe, of those who maybe don't want everything to fit together too much yet, and want to be in their own little bubble, maybe, and others who really are ready to work together.
So what is the biggest challenge that you see moving towards that vision that you have?
There's a lot of invested interest in monetary gain. And, as the Buddha said, there are 6 different poisons for the mind, and one of them is greed. And if we don't get greed under control, it starts to become a neurotic habit that takes us out of alignment with many, many things around us. And I do think we live on a planet with a whole system that generates greed. You just have to open up online, social media, to see that. And then you've got this kind of vanity and narcissistic self-aggrandizement, and really quite a skewed idea of what value really is, especially as we get less and less connected to nature. I grew up in Africa with the wilderness nearby. I'd go on safari and see wild animals. And in my lifetime, the amount of elephant, lion, cheetah, leopard population has declined tremendously. The whale population used to exist as this flourishing, amazing, highly intelligent force of nature that I remember in your parts of the world, Anthony, even people communicated with. Whereas now the whale population is so severely culled. So it's just showing us that the contact point with natural resources has declined so much more. And what does that say about our own natural instinct and our own natural capacity, that our own attunement and alignment and intuition through the natural instinct is less and less available to us even. So I think this is a huge challenge. And I think the people that have managed to maintain that connection are really powerful seers, sages for our time that bring back knowledge that very soon might be gone forever. So whatever we can do to keep a healthy relationship with our own nature and nature itself is very important. And also to recognize the parts of us that are going to lead us astray and to master our mind over them. Things like greed and vanity and sort of not being emotionally intelligent about ourselves, about others. There are many of them, but I'll stay with those for now.
Yeah. And what is one myth about leadership that you could think needs to be unlearned for this future to happen?
That it's about you being a leader. I think it's more about, I studied something called facilitative leadership under a man called Dr. Arnold Mandel, who recently passed, an amazing man who was the father of conflict resolution theory. And I had the privilege to meet him and work with him in these huge gatherings where we would do something called world work, processing world issues in a group, which again was a type of energy medicine, because the idea was that if we processed them in a small group, they would change in the way that they affected the world consciousness, and we would all become much more aware of certain topics. So we worked on many political issues and therapeutic issues in those spaces. People from 45 countries would gather and do this work. It was profound and life-changing because it was very clear that when you're leading a group or when you are guiding, the wisdom is in the group. It's not in the leader. The leader's job is to open the space, to open the field, in a more energy type word, which is part of Dr. Arnold Mandel's style of work. I mean, he used Einstein's theory to talk about how light is in every moment of conflict. And he was able to explain these very physics-based concepts back into spirituality and psychology, and it all fits together. Nothing is separate. We are in one unified whole experience that all works together. And I think this is a great point for us to know that the leader that can even become invisible is one of the best leaders of them all.
Mm.
But the wisdom of the group is what rises and shines. And that takes a really high level of skill, and it's an art. And you have to truly understand that we are all connected to do that, to manage that. And you also have to know how to disappear into yourself so that others can rise. And why that's really much more useful than you being the one that decides.
Love it. Love everything you've shared tonight.
Me too. With you and your peers and all the people watching, thank you so much for listening. It's been great to share it all.
Now, people listening to this will resonate with us, and they'll say, I want to connect with Helen. How do they connect with you, and what else would you like to share briefly that could help people on their journey?
Thank you, Anthony. I have a website, helenargyrou.com. Very soon it will just be under my name, helenargyrou.com, transporting the website very soon. But I think, I guess I just want to invite people generally, if they want to connect on LinkedIn. I'm always building my communications best there because I work globally. But if you do feel called or drawn to be part of this broader ecosystem of experts, we're crossing 5 continents now and really looking for people that want to be in the wellness, well-being, and behavioral science of health and medicine, all of it combined into this ecosystem. You're very welcome, and we'd love to invite you to our events. We have October every year in Cyprus. Come and visit. It's an amazing place, and I'd love to show you around. And then, of course, we also have these satellite projects that we're doing on summits. So if you wanted to follow any of that, you just check out Energy Medicine on LinkedIn. There's an actual page there. And we have satellite events in exotic countries. Like we're going to India at the end of January. And if you have a book or you want to be part of our leadership forum, we have a luminary leaders mastermind type group where we go to present books at the book fair, 2 million guests there. We do retreat there. We go to the universities, talk to 800 students in India. And then we'll host in Rajasthan the Energy Medicine India forum, which is really to connect Ayurvedic doctors with traditional doctors and to merge more Western with Eastern scientists, because there's a lot of new research right now on health and pushing the frontiers of chronic illnesses, treatment thereof that don't involve invasive methods, as well as new discoveries. So we're always interested in innovation in health. So if you're in that conversation, interested to invest, or you have projects that you know are really for the future of healthcare, we'd love to hear from you. And then, of course, we also have in 2028, we'll be going to Mexico to an indigenous plant center, which is run under the Art and Cultural Ministry. And we'll be holding an energy medicine event there to talk more about the power of medical herbalism and how it combines also with medical interventions, because there's a whole science there that's also being rejuvenated. And there's many more ways for us to work together if you're interested, because we're all about creating an ecosystem of leaders who really resonate. And if that's you, please reach out. It would be great to meet you. You can also find me on inspire@gmail.com. Nice and easy.
Nice, Helen. And, I'd love to have you back for some webinars, some lives, and see what we can also do together as well.
Sounds fantastic. I'd love to come.
I'm all about collaboration. So it's like, it's about the collective consciousness. Collectively, we can get the word out there. Now, I've got a very quick 6 questions for you, quick fire questions. Yeah. First question is, how do you define success, and has that definition evolved for you over time?
Great question. It has evolved, and I just wrote a post on Facebook. You have arrived when you decide you've arrived, and I definitely feel like I've arrived, and I only realized what success was when I felt like I arrived. And so for me, success is when you actually do the things you dreamt you wanted to do, enough of them to feel like you're not starving, or you're not sad, or you're not disappointed by the fact that you haven't. So it's not about money. It's not about men, relationships, kids, family. It's none of that for me. There's so many twists and turns in life. I think for me, it's really fulfilling yourself with what you dreamed your life would be.
Yeah, 100%. Who's been your greatest inspiration and why?
Oof, I have so many. There's a very interesting Indian saint. Her name is Anandamayi. Lately, she's become very inspiring to me, even just looking at her picture, because apparently she lived her entire life in this state of absolute bliss. And when you go deeper into learning about her story, she was a very, very poor lady. She became the saint of her husband, who was a spiritual teacher at the time. So she kind of surpassed him, and people just came to meet her and found out about her. And I think what draws me so much to her is the fact that she had reached this state of pure gratitude for every single moment that she was alive, and astounded at the beauty of life continuously, never distracted back into the density of, oh my God, I have to make money to feed myself, or I've got to say nice things to that person because they were nice to me. None of this kind of normal stuff that we get hung up on. She was just totally in touch all the time. Can you imagine what that would be like if you were always remembering the gift of being alive every single moment, the way you'd speak to people, the way you'd comfort yourself when something doesn't go well? You just remember, wow, I'm still here. This is amazing.
Love her. Have to check her out. What is something that you believe that others may disagree with?
Wow, I have a lot. Let me try and find one really quickly. A lot of people disagree, I think, with the amount of permission I give people to stand away from society. I think it's really important that you find your own groove in life. And there are many things that prevent you from doing that because of the attachments you have to others and things that you want, things that you actually even need sometimes. So it takes a little bit of courage to be able to stand away from enough things to really know a deeper truth about yourself. But a lot of people think that that's not necessary, that maybe there's, more in relating, more in relationships. So I guess it's a controversial point.
If you could go back and give young Helen some advice, what would it be?
Well done. I don't have anything to tell her. I would just say, just wait. You're going to find out a whole lot of stuff that you just can't even imagine. I was very, very bright and bushy-tailed when I was young, so I'm happy with that where I was. But I think I did realize things aren't as innocent and positive as I thought they would be.
What is one message that you'd like to share with the world?
Define, align, and refine your energy so that you can become the medicine for the world.
And the last question for you is, what does it mean to you to be a champion and have a champion mindset?
Love that. It's to really never give up, no matter what comes. Find a way, and if you don't, wait till you find a way to see why it happened and why you are and can be triumphant every single time, only if you just carry on, if you never give up.
Helen, I've really enjoyed this conversation. And like I said before, I'd love to have you back doing some other things as well. Thank you for sharing your insights and your vision with us. It's a powerful reminder that true leadership comes from deep understanding of ourselves. I think the biggest takeaway for me is how important it is to connect with your inner energy with external action. For anyone listening, if you've been inspired by Helen's perspectives, subscribe to the Champion Mindset Collective podcast. Also share this with someone who needs to hear it, and check out all the show notes. And also there'll be a dedicated page on the Champion Mindset Collective website with all of the information that we've talked about today. There'll be an article, a practical guide that you can download, a 3-page guide, a PDF that you can download for free and be able to reflect, and some practical steps on how to move forward in your life. If you're a leader looking to free up your valuable time by strategically integrating AI and workflow automation into your business, then book a clarity assessment call with me and let's help you there as well. Lastly, I just want to say thank you for being on the Champion Mindset Collective, and you are loved, you're worthy, champion your life, champion your greatness, and have an amazing day.